Welcome to today's Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee call with Federal Trade Commission Chairman Joseph Simons. All participants will be in listen-only mode. For members to join the question queue, please press *3. For the question and answer session, I will let you know when your line is live to ask a question. I will now turn the briefing over to Chair Cathy.
Thank you so much, Zach, and thanks to everyone for joining us on this call today. We have such a good turnout, and we're so fortunate to have with us Federal Trade Commission Chairman Joe Simons. And while it's difficult for us to get together, it is important, I believe, that we continue to do our work and do it in the open and the transparent way. And the American people should know that we are still working and what we are working on. I do want to say that just as we do when we're in Washington, D.C., the press was invited to listen to this conversation just as we would if we were having a regular event in Washington. Let me just say that in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson signed into law the Federal Trade Commission Act, which prohibits unfair and deceptive trade practices, and then first established the Federal Trade Commission to enforce those prohibitions. In the ensuing 106 years, the Commission has evolved and today serves as the primary cop on the beat, in addition to enforcing other related consumer protections such as the mail, internet and telephone ordering merchandise rules. So when we order as we are doing now, ordering merchandise online, the funeral rule, and COPPA, the Children's Online Protection Act, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. During disasters, we see rates of predatory actions skyrocketing, and with these nefarious actors targeting the most vulnerable among us. And that's why it is so critical for the Commission to reject calls by an industry to weaken COPPA, and especially before it has completed the required market research and 6B studies. It's the FTC's job to crack down on all malicious actors, and I am urging the escalation of their efforts in this moment that is so fraught. I really want to thank you, Chairman Simons, for being here with us today. We may not always agree, especially when it comes to pharmaceutical mergers and enforcement strategies, but we can't doubt your sincerity. I know you are someone that we can all work with. And so at this point, let me yield to our ranking member from the great state of Washington, Cathy Mcmorris-Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you today, and I completely agree that we do have important work to be doing, and I appreciate you helping bring us together today, and I hope to see you soon in person so that we can continue this work. I want to thank Chairman Simons for joining us. We absolutely need to make sure that Americans are protected from COVID-related scams. I appreciate everything that the FTC has done so far to combat bad actors looking to take advantage of this terrible crisis, whether it's scams, robocalls, price gouging, privacy and data security, or other fraud. As you said, the FTC is the top cop on the beat for protecting consumers from harm. The Commission has lived up to that role during this pandemic, and I commend the commissioners and their staff for their hard work and dedication to the American people. Technology has been key to allowing people to continue working and remain connected while being forced to work from home and being separated. As states and localities begin reopening, technology is going to play a further role. We've all heard about the proposals to use technology to track and trace, which could be key to opening up our economy safely. As you all know, I've been a staunch supporter of Congress passing a national privacy standard, and I believe it is more important than ever in the context of this pandemic that Americans must be assured of their privacy and that their privacy will be protected with these proposed technologies. Without consumer trust, the effectiveness of these solutions will be limited. A strong national framework is vital to cultivating that trust, and it only provides our innovators with certainty, but it will also ensure Americans enjoy the same protections no matter what state you live in. The FTC has been the country's top enforcer of data privacy and security and must continue to be. So I look forward to working with you, Chairman Simons, as we continue to grapple with the new challenges this pandemic is creating, protecting our constituents on and offline and working national privacy law. And look forward to hearing your comments today. Thank you.
Thank you, my ranking member. And now I am going to begin with the first question, and then we'll go to others. I did invite, for those of you on the call.
Chair Schakowsky, don't we need to hear from Mr. Simons?
Yes, indeed. Sorry about that, of course. Mr. Simons, Joe Simons, Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, it is now my pleasure to let you speak, and then we will return for questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chair Schakowsky and Ranking Member Mcmorris Rogers. Hi, this is Joe Simons, and I'm joined on the call by my colleague Andrew Smith, the Director of our Bureau of Consumer Protection at the FTC. The first thing I want to do is to thank the committee for its support, and in particular for the additional funding we received this year. I just can't tell you how much of a difference this makes for us. Rather than significantly reducing headcount, we are increasing it, and at a time like this, that's really important. Next, let me assure you that we are continuing to fulfill our mission to protect American consumers, even under these very difficult circumstances. Our staff at the FTC is absolutely terrific. They continue to be highly productive and effective, even though they are working almost entirely from home. We've acted with speed and aggressiveness to protect consumers against pandemic-related scams and other challenges. With our state and federal partners, we've moved swiftly to identify and stop unfair and deceptive business practices arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've sent more than 120 warning letters concerning COVID-related scams, and these have been highly effective. We've also pursued targeted federal enforcement, and we've worked aggressively to educate consumers. We recently obtained a preliminary injunction against a company based on allegations that the company was an imposter, holding itself out as the SBA and accepting loan applications from desperate small businesses that they thought were applying for CARES Act funds. We've also worked with the FCC and other industry partners to pursue VoIP providers that allegedly assist and facilitate illegal robocalls to perpetrate COVID-19 scams. The FTC is monitoring the marketplace and will hold accountable those who take advantage of consumers' financial distress or their fears and anxiety about COVID-19. Finally, I would just like to remind you of the critical need in light of recent court legislation to amend 13B of the FTC Act so that we can continue to get feedback to consumers. Let me stop there and just make one disclaimer to make my general counsel's office happy, which is that my statements and responses to your questions today are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of the Commission or any individual commissioner. And with that, I'll stop and look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you so very much. This is Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and I do want to thank you, Chairman Simons, for the work that you've been doing on these the scams, and hope that the word will get out that it is not worth even trying. But we know that there were so many difficulties in our with our constituents applying for the payroll protection program, and then to have someone pretending to be the SBA is really, really terrible and unforgivable. So thank you for looking into those. Throughout this crisis, my office, and I'm sure many of my colleagues on the phone and beyond, have also heard about various kinds of price gouging. I mean, it could lead from toilet paper to other household products that have actually just skyrocketed in price to take advantage of the moment. And while the attorneys general in many states are doing what they can to help consumers, not all states actually have price gouging laws, and some state laws that do exist don't really cover the current circumstances. A few weeks ago, I introduced a bill with several of my colleagues to allow the Federal Trade Commission to fine price gougers during this public health emergency. The FTC has never really been that active when it comes to price gouging under its authority and under its deceptive and unfair and deceptive practices of authority. And so Congress passed price gouging. If Congress passes price gouging legislation, will you be committed to protecting consumers under that law? But actually, let me precede that with saying, do you feel that you have enough authority right now to address the price gouging situation? And does it take some change in the law in order to make sure that you can actually do that?
Yes,
that's
thank
my
you.
Question.
Okay, terrific. No, we don't really think that we have the authority now to do it. It's not a good fit for our current statute. And yes, we would be very much willing, eager, and enthusiastic in protecting consumers under any statute that you provide. And doing it as a separate standalone statute actually is consistent with the approach that we find in most states, where most states have both baby FTC acts and separately independent price gouging legislation. So that would be what, if you were to pass a price gouging legislation for us, that would be similar to what the program is in the states today.
Although not all the states have those laws, do they?
No, I think it's about maybe 30 or 35, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Which I think adds a certain urgency to us doing something that gives you the very clear authority to take action. But I appreciate your response. Zach, let me just turn it over to the ranking member, Ms. Rogers, and I'm wondering if after that you wanted to just call on all of our members, beginning with the ranking members of the full committee. So, Cathy Mcmorris Rogers, you are live.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate your work, Chairman Simons. Appreciate your leadership. Another area where COVID-19 has really highlighted the importance of protections for consumers is around teleconferencing, video conferencing. We're all using Zoom on a very regular basis. There's been a lot of issues raised around privacy and making sure that those sessions are protected, especially now as we are relying upon these sessions even more, and even Congress is looking at some of this. I just wondered if you would speak to the best practices or the guidelines that you think we should be mindful of, and if there's a particular area that we should be focused when it comes to unauthorized access and abuse of users' information.
Sure. So some of this is pretty simple. First, like anything else, use a password to protect your video conference so that unexpected parties can't join it. And a lot of these softwares have tools, so you take advantage of tools to limit participation in a meeting. And for example, one way to do that is by locking the meeting after all the participants who are supposed to show up have showed up and someone doesn't get in after the fact. Another thing to be careful about is, you might get an unexpected meeting link. It comes in an email and says, "Here, let's have this conference," and you don't have no idea, what the person is talking about. Don't click on that link. It could be a phishing attack. Contact the people who you want in your conference and let them know that the invitation is coming, so they expect it. And we have information, more information like this on our website, and I would encourage people to take a look at it. Thank you.
Great. Is there anything related to privacy in particular that you think needs to be addressed in light of COVID-19 and video conferencing and all of the issues that have been raised?
Well, it's like a whole host of things. I mean, who's ever running the conference should be aware of and tell people what the privacy parameters are on it. I had a situation myself and with my family where someone was invited to a meeting, a Zoom meeting, and there was an issue about whether it was someone who was going to record it or not. So the normal privacy considerations that apply otherwise also apply in these teleconference situations. Think about what information you're collecting, how it's going to be used, and you're getting consent for how to do that. And then if something is really being collected and stored, are you protecting it properly? So a lot of the same things apply, outside of video conferencing.
Okay, thank you.
And as a reminder to
Go ahead.
And as a reminder to all to all members, please press *3 to enter the question queue. I will now recognize Chairman Pallone.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Chairman and Jan. On a lighter note, Chairman Simons, when you mentioned phishing attacks, I'm at the Jersey Shore and we're about to open up, and I was on the call with Noah this morning trying to get the phishing money out of the CARES Act. And I'm just laughing because I'm thinking of shark attacks and phishing attacks in the real world. So leaving that aside,
I'm from the Jersey Shore, right? I'm from the Jersey Shore.
I know, so I couldn't help thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm from Tom's River.
Exactly. But in any case, I wanted to ask about the live event ticketing. I know that our O&I team has been investigating the refund practices of these concert and sports events, and I know that last week you issued, Chairman Simons, a paper on the FTC's work on the ticketing market. But the problem that I have is that, I just get a lot of calls from consumers, and we've contacted all the ticketing companies and sports leagues on behalf of the committee about their refund policies to try to ensure that consumers are being treated fairly. And unfortunately, I'm seeing that a lot of events are being postponed instead of canceled to avoid refunding customers for to cancel the event, and they say, okay, got a refund, but it's postponed, we don't have to do it. So what can the FTC do to help people get refunds? And if Congress passed a law giving the FTC the authority to address unfair or deceptive practices in the live event ticketing market, as our staff has recommended, how would you use that authority? Those are my two questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a really significant issue. We recognize that, and we take these concerns really seriously. And if legislation is enacted, we'll enforce it vigorously to ensure that there's a consumer-friendly ticket market. To the extent that ticket sellers are engaged in unfair and deceptive conduct, including breaking their promises when refunds would be issued, we can address that now under our organic FTC Section 5 authority, and that's something that we're paying a lot of close attention to right now.
But in other words, what I guess I'm asking is, are you taking, I just worry that they're all going to say, oh, we're not canceling the event, we're just postponing it. Does that matter in terms of what you can do?
It's just a factual situation that we have to deal with, and it depends on, each situation could be different. It all depends. A lot of it depends on disclosure and what the policies are that they've announced ahead of time, and whether they're complying with those policies or not.
Okay.
So that would be one thing, and then what they've said, what they're saying now. Like for example, you can imagine a situation where they're saying we postpone, but they know in fact that they have to cancel, right? And so that would be.
You have to look at them individually. All right. I just wanted to make sure you're on top of it, and I know you are. So thanks a lot.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
I will now recognize Ranking Member Walden.
Thanks, Zach, and Chairman Simons, thanks to you and your team for the great work you're doing. I'm sure you've got far more cases on your plate than you ever anticipated, given what we're all going through. Two things. One, to follow up on what Frank just said. The other piece of this refund issue is I get some people telling me that companies are so complicating the process to, in effect, make sure you never are able to take advantage of the refund. You've got to get this PIN and enter it in that way, and maybe it shows up 3 weeks from now. And I mean, I know your team must be evaluating that, because others are able to say, yeah, here's your refund. And you just feel like on some companies, they're going to run you through every knothole they can. So it makes it so difficult, you'll either not be able to take advantage of it or just give up. So I posit that first. The second is, I know you all have sent 3 letters to 3 companies in Oregon, warning them to stop making claims they could treat or prevent COVID-19. And I just wonder, is that kind of the most common scam you're seeing right now? And then what else we need to be aware of on our end? So thanks again.
All right, thank you. So just in terms of getting these people to jump through the hoops on your first question, this is something that we see in other situations outside of the pandemic circumstances, and so this is something that we look at regularly. And if that's what they're doing, that's something we look at really carefully, and it just depends again on the facts. Sometimes people kind of are just not well run; they have a big ramp up in requests. That's one thing, but a lot of times that's not the situation at all, and they are doing it advertently, and that's problematic. In terms of your second question, claims suggesting treatment or prevention of COVID-19 has certainly been one of the most common scams, though we've seen scam robocalls and texts about checks from the government and multi-level marketing organizations targeting people laid off during the pandemic, promising get-rich-quick schemes. And where we've seen questionable claims, we've acted quickly by sending warning letters in the first instance, and we've sent over 135 of those so far, and requiring compliance with those letters within 48 hours. And the good news is that almost all of those folks have removed their problematic claims, but in certain instances we've had to sue, and we have. We obtained a preliminary injunction against Thrive Supplements. This is our first case alleging a falsely claimed supplement will treat coronavirus without evidence of its ability to do so. And we recently sued another company alleging that company preyed on small businesses, like I mentioned earlier, seeking loans by pretending to be an SBA-approved lender. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I will now recognize Representative Castor. Representative Castor, your line is live.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Chair Schakowsky, for organizing the briefing, and thank you, Chairman Simons. As you know, the COVID pandemic has led many Americans being quarantined at home, and it's especially true for our kids and children across the country. In most areas, schools have moved online, and there are fewer opportunities for kids to get out of the house, and as a result, children are spending much more time on the internet and social media for schooling and entertainment and everything. In this new environment of increased online activity, what is the FTC doing to ensure that companies are complying with the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, and has the FTC made any changes to the enforcement of COPPA as a result? I know the FTC is conducting a review of the rules implementing COPPA. How has the pandemic impacted that review, and will you take that into account as you continue with the rules review? Thanks so much.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. We've thought a lot about how children are relying on the internet much more due to the current crisis, both for school and for entertainment. And we've published guidance for parents, schools, ed tech providers on this issue. And the Commission has continued to both enforce the law and move forward on our rule review very aggressively. We remain open and active on all fronts, and we provided the following guidance. For ed tech providers, we tell them how to comply with COPPA when collecting kids' information in the virtual school setting. For schools, we tell them what questions to ask ed tech providers to make sure that they're protecting your students' information. And for parents, we've given guidance on how to pick virtual learning services outside school. Thanks.
Can I just ask, this is Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, is that information that you ask of these tech companies anywhere on your website so that we can see, for example, the advice to parents?
Yes, I'm sure it is, and I can get that for you. Or maybe Andrew knows, I don't know.
That would be great.
Yes, this is Andrew Smith, the Director of the Bureau of Consumer Protection. If you go to ftc.gov/COPPA, C-O-P-P-A, you'll find all of our guidance and FAQs and the like, including recent guidance. Also on ftc.gov/coronavirus, we have guidance, and that guidance may also be included there. And in addition, there are tips on things like working from home and information security when working from home. So both of those places might be, I think, would be helpful.
Thank you.
I will now recognize Representative Upton. Representative Upton, your line is live.
Well, thanks so much. And Jan, thanks so much for having this hearing. Glad to participate. I guess my question is this. I know the President announced a couple weeks ago he asked all of the U.S. attorneys around the country to look for price gougers and to go after them big time if they could. And I'm just wondering, how is that working, in the states that don't have price gouging laws? You indicated, Mr. Chairman, that you thought only 30 to 35 states might have standalone laws that are in place. But what else can we do? And are you working with the U.S. Attorney's Office as it relates to that? And maybe if you can just shed a few more details on that awful PPP small business case that you were looking at, just so we have a little bit more details. How many loans? What was the dollar amount? Might be helpful to us as we talk about the good things that you all are doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are sending referrals to the state AGs that have the price gouging, and we're also looking to make referrals to the DOJ, and we've done that. The DOJ, from what I understand, is hugely active in this area. I think they have maybe 200 investigations, and those investigations are authorized under the DPA, and so they're very active. We have, just by comparison, they have 200 open investigations just for price gouging. We have probably 200 open investigations for everything we do in the Bureau of Consumer Protection. So it's a pretty monstrous thing. And if you pass legislation, we would add add a role for us in that, and we would almost certainly be diverting resources to that as well. I don't know, Andrew, do you want to talk about the details of that SBA case?
Sure. So my understanding was that they had collected applications from I think, a couple of thousand businesses. But you had asked about loan amounts and things like this. So they weren't approved as an SBA lender. So they were collecting this application information, but they were not actually approving people for SBA loans or, necessarily any loans. So, it's possible that what they were doing was collecting this information as leads for other types of marketing, but they were not making loans to people. And so what we allege to be the real injury here was that these businesses, as you all know, it's been difficult to get these PPP loans, and there's been a limited amount of money, and the money runs out quickly. So if you spend your time, 2 or 3 weeks waiting in line for a loan that's never going to materialize, that's a pretty significant opportunity cost. And so that was the real harm we alleged in connection with this. I will now recognize. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, that's it.
I will now recognize Representative Cardenas. Representative Cardenas, your line is live.
Yes, thank you. Something caught my attention that apparently the FTC has been able to get consumers, defend them and get them some of their money back, and to the tune of $1 billion over the last 4 years. Has anybody at the department, at the FTC, has anybody guesstimated or estimated during this heightened activity what the likelihood of the amount of money that is being stolen from the American people, or et cetera? Is it now $4 billion that you've been able to collect over the last 4 years is probably a subset of the overall estimate of the activity that people got ripped off. So during this pandemic period, what's the estimation of that, and what tools do you need in order to be able to use 13B or with more clarity? Can Congress help clarify your authority there? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're acting aggressively as we can to stop these scams preying on consumers. Like I said earlier, over 120 warning letters relating to sellers of bogus COVID-19 treatment products, and many of those letters we do in conjunction with the FDA. We send these letters and we give the companies 48 hours to remedy the deceptive claims. And the warning letters have been extremely effective, almost 100% compliance. And as I said earlier, we won't hesitate to bring enforcement when it's appropriate, and we've done that already. In terms of what's going on and what's getting in the way a little bit, many courts have restricted hearings on new civil matters, but they still hear emergency motions for TROs, and we've had 2 of those. With respect to 13B, we really need Congress to clarify our authority so that we can continue to use this really important tool to get money back for consumers. 13B is the primary way we do that, and challenges to this type of authority have preceded the pandemic, but of course they are continuing. There have been multiple circuit court decisions that make it harder to redress COVID-related scam cases as well as any other case, and we really need your help in that regard to clarify 13B so that we can continue to collect money for consumer redress. The big problem we have now is we get a challenge because of these cases. Every time we go into or try to prosecute a case, we get this argument that, oh, you don't have the authority to do that, you can't get money, and maybe you don't even have the authority to be in court because it's not timely, it's not imminent, and the statute, they say, requires that. And so our litigation has become much more difficult and uncertain, and so we really do need your help in that regard.
Any estimates of the activity?
No. What I would say is that so far, we're spending a lot of time monitoring, and what we've been relatively successful in getting these things before they've gone too far. So at least for the ones we've gotten so far, I don't think there's been a lot of damage. But that, of course, as time goes on, the damage will get larger. So, but no, just to answer your question, no, we don't have an estimate.
I will now recognize Representative Burgess. Representative Burgess, your line is live.
Thank you, and thanks for doing this call. It's obviously it's a time unlike any other. I just wondered, Commissioner, if you're seeing any trends that you would identify as being kind of unique to this pandemic, or the types of problems you're encountering just pretty standard, what you would normally deal with?
I think it's pretty standard, and that's only because of the creativity of scammers in general. I mean, they are relentless and they're creative, and there are just so many different variations on what they do. It's quite remarkable. But we've seen three basic categories of scams, I would say. So scams hawking bogus cures and preventions for coronavirus, and we've attacked that with a lot of these warning letters, and we sued a company, as I mentioned. There are scams that are based on financial hardship and confusion over government programs that are available to help. Based on what we saw with the 2008 downturn, we expect this type of fraud to continue for a long time. We brought one case and obtained an injunction, and we are very, very actively looking for new targets. Another type is imposter scams, designed to trick people into giving personally sensitive information. A lot of these scammers operate offshore, and they're difficult to trace, but we have had some success targeting VoIP providers who facilitate their robocall campaigns. They are the way that the robocaller gets access to the U.S. telephone network. And we've sent a dozen warning letters to those folks, some with the FCC, and those have been very effective as well. And actually, we are kind of encouraged a little bit because we are seeing somewhat of a decline in robocalling, although we're not saying that that's completely attributable to what we're doing, but in part we think it is. And for all of these scams and other scams, we're doing extensive outreach and consumer education. And we're just continue to be aggressive and bring law enforcement actions as appropriate. Thank you.
I will now recognize Representative Blunt Rochester. Representative Blunt Rochester, your line is live.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chairwoman Schakowsky and Ranking Member Mcmorris Rogers for the opportunity, and thank you, Chairman Simon. In recent weeks, Google and Apple have made the news with the development of digital applications to facilitate COVID-19 contact tracing. And just yesterday, I saw a story in CNBC entitled, "As Workplaces Slowly Reopen, Tech Companies Smell a New Multi-Billion-Dollar Opportunity to Help Businesses Trace Coronavirus." In light of that, I understand there are also several in development, like Kings County, Washington, and some public health agents, advocacy groups in different states, including Rhode Island and Massachusetts, are looking at this. Even in my own Newcastle County, Delaware, conversation about using technology. So my question is, what role, if any, is the FTC playing to advise, regulate, or oversee the development of the applications by companies like Google or Apple, pilot projects, and any contact tracing applications?
Yeah, so this is obviously really important, and we're monitoring developments in this area very, very closely, and especially since at least one of the companies, Google, is already under an FTC order. We want to make sure that we stay closely involved and we monitor their compliance with the order. And then in addition, even irrespective of the order, we want to make sure that they're doing the right things and they're paying close attention to privacy concerns. And so we're actively involved. We're talking to people in the industry, and we're also we'll work with our sister agencies in this area as appropriate, as we do on many other issues.
I will now recognize Representative Latta. Representative Latta, your line is live.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank my good friend, the chair, for holding today's teleconference. It's really very informative. And also I want to thank you, Chairman, for all the work you're doing with the FTC. about a year and a half ago. It's hard to keep track of time, but you had the FTC and also the IRS out to my district to talk to seniors in regards to senior scams and about the $38 billion that seniors are scammed every year. And you mentioned, because I also worked on the robocall legislation, but when you look at what's happened now with some of our senior centers across the country, probably about all of them are closed right now, how are we getting the word out to the seniors to protect themselves? And then also, you mentioned about you thought on the robocall scam, but as we know that the vast majority, of course, the illegal ones have come from overseas, especially India. How are we protecting seniors today?
Okay, so thank you, Congressman. So one of the things that we do, or like a really important thing that we do, is outreach to groups that themselves are either made up of seniors as their members or otherwise. And so we're conducting webinars, teletown halls, Twitter chats, media interviews with local and national outlets. We're using our 8 regional offices to do that locally and focus on local issues. One of the teletown halls that we had was in conjunction with AARP, and there were over 80,000 participants on that. We've launched a web page for consumers, as Andrew mentioned, ftc.gov/coronavirus/scams, and it's also in Spanish. And we have a consumer alert blog that has more than 350,000 subscribers, including consumers, our partners, our local and state partners, and the media. And so this gets the word out on TV, on radio as well. So I mean those are the types of things we're doing, but we're pretty aggressive in the consumer outreach area. Thanks for your question.
I will now recognize Representative Soto. Representative Soto, your line is live.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Chairman, for being here. I have 2 related questions. One, I've been deeply disturbed by the price gouging and hoarding of personal protective equipment, and a lot of these intermediaries that have defrauded or vastly raised prices on everybody from local governments to local businesses. So I wanted to get like a specific response on the PPE issue, as well as, are you using any new technologies to help monitor the internet, such as AI or blockchain or others, to be able to really track this down on a massive scale?
Thank you. So on the price gouging, we're monitoring the marketplace and making referrals to state AGs and to the DOJ, who is operating under the Defense Production Act. And if we get our own authority, then we'll obviously enforce that as well. In terms of technology, I'll address one thing that we've had for a while, but which is really, really good, which is our consumer Sentinel system. It's our online consumer complaint database, and it provides law enforcers with real-time access to millions of consumer complaints, including more than 40,000 reported COVID-related frauds. Sentinel has a highly sophisticated data mining tool that allows our investigators, as well as more than 1,500 other law enforcement officials that use it, to spot trends and identify targets. And in fact, we've had a very rapid growth in the number of Sentinel users as federal, state, and local authorities are working to stop this insidious scammers trying to capitalize on the pandemic. And we now have a historically high number of Sentinel users, and we've instituted weekly training programs to bring more online. And we're using various different tech platforms to get the word out, as I mentioned, Twitter chats, teletown halls, blogging, and videos. Andrew, do you want to address what we're doing on AI and some of these other things?
Sure. We have been crawling the web to try to find scams. I would say that other agencies are also doing that and very effectively, and so we haven't wanted to duplicate our efforts. But one of the general federal government efforts is to find new websites that include COVID or coronavirus in their name, and move proactively to take those down. With respect to other AI efforts, I think that the chairman nailed it when he said that when he referred to Sentinel and our efforts to mine our complaints in Sentinel to try to target law enforcement efforts, and also make those same complaints available to our 1,500 law enforcement partners who can do the same targeting.
I will now recognize Representative Guthrie. Representative Guthrie, your line is live.
Hey, thank you very much. Actually, Bob Latta asked, and the question was answered that I was going to ask, so I will yield back.
I will now recognize Representative Rush. Representative Rush, your line is live.
Good morning, Commissioner, and thanks, Madam Chairlady, for this hearing. Commissioner, I want to congratulate you all on the outstanding work that you have been doing protecting American consumers. But I have a couple of questions. Have you seen disproportionate share of unfair and deceptive practices that are targeted toward seniors and or the African American minority communities in general? And my second question is what are you doing to ensure that these and other groups are not being taken advantage of, particularly as it relates to scams focusing on the many multi-varied governmental assistance programs?
Thank you, Congressman. So we have not seen a disproportionate share of unfair and deceptive practices directed towards older Americans or minority communities. Unfortunately, scammers are equal opportunity con artists, and they go after everybody. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. The data suggests that younger people get scammed more often, although older people get scammed for more money. So it's interesting and bad either way. But that's to answer your question. In terms of what we're trying to do to protect people, one of the things is we've created a lot of resources. So we have a web page for consumers, ftc.gov/coronavirus/scams. It's also available in Spanish. We have published dozens of blogs and other consumer education pieces and translated them into a variety of languages, and they cover every imaginable scam, including scams focusing on government assistance programs. We've created a full Spanish language website and selected materials have also translated into Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese. Again, we've had extensive outreach in English and Spanish to our state partners, the media, AARP, the Better Business Bureau, the National Association of Attorneys General, and the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and others. And we're conducting lots of webinars, teletown halls, Twitter chats, and media interviews with both local and national outlets to try to get the word out to people.
I will now recognize Representative Hudson. Representative Hudson, your line is live.
Thank you. My question was asked earlier as well. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time today. It's been very informative. Thank you. I'll yield back.
I will now recognize Representative Matsui. Representative Matsui, your line is live.
Thank you very much, Zach, and I want to thank Chairwoman Schakowsky and Ranking Member Mcmorris Rogers for putting together this virtual session. I certainly want to thank Chairman Simons. My question is, the FTC recently announced that it will be increasing surveillance efforts to detect collusion in labor markets, including agreements to lower wages, salaries, or hours worked. Now, given the unprecedented number of unemployment claims announced last week and the previous weeks also, I believe it is critical that the federal government is doing everything in its power to protect and preserve American jobs. Mr. Chairman, does the FTC have the needed resources to adequately monitor the labor market for these violations? And how will the agency be reallocating internal resources during this health crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. So we agree with you in terms of the level of concern for working people and to protect them against anti-competitive behavior, particularly in such difficult times. We issued a joint statement with the Department of Justice and the Antitrust Division on April 13th, making it clear that we will aggressively go after employers who collude to deprive workers of competitive compensation for their hard and sometimes dangerous work during these times, often dangerous work. And we are very much on the lookout for complaints about this kind of activity. And where appropriate, we would refer this type of conduct for potential criminal prosecution to the DOJ. One of the things that is going on now is that we have a lull in pre-merger notification filings, and so that's a little bit of a downturn in our business on the competition side, and so we can use that to redirect people and resources to other issues, including labor issues, and we'll do that as appropriate.
I will now recognize Representative McNerney. Representative McNerney, your line is live.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you, Chairwoman Schakowsky, for holding this hearing, and thank you, Chairman Simons. I appreciate your work on this. To start with, I'd like to note that last month I sent a letter with 18 members of this committee to Zoom's CEO to ask about their privacy practices. I know you may not be able to comment on this, but I hope that the FTC is also looking into privacy and security concerns that have been raised about Zoom's and other video conferencing platforms' practices. So that's just a comment. Chairman Simons, my question is a follow-up on your response to Congresswoman Blunt-Rochester's question. Is the FTC taking any other steps to address privacy concerns related to contract tracing and surveillance? And this is a question that is getting a lot of attention, and I think it's something that we need to think strongly about in Congress, but what is the agency doing that would, I'm just trying to drill down on this question. What is the agency doing in addition to what you've mentioned before?
Okay, thank you for that. So first of all, I would like to respond to your comment, which is that one thing I will say is that we are very happy to take complaints from any source. It doesn't have to be invented where we are. And oftentimes we get complaints from Congress, which are helpful. We get them from the public, Sentinel. We get them in lots of different places, law enforcement, partners, etc. And so with respect to Zoom or anybody else really, if you're reading about it in the press, if you're reading about it in the media, then you can be assured that either we're looking at it already, or if we're not, we will as a result of that media attention. So that's one of the things we monitor, and so if it's out there in the media, we're on it. In terms of privacy concerns relating to contact tracing, we are all over that too. We are monitoring the rollout of these apps. We're talking to the companies involved. At least one of them is under an FTC order already, and so we're actively engaged, making sure that they stay in compliance with our order. And this is obviously a very important thing for our country, and so we view it as very important at the FTC, and we're spending a lot of time paying attention to it. Thank you.
We currently have one caller left in the queue. I will now recognize Representative Dingell. Representative Dingell, your line is live.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about privacy. Given that so much of our daily lives have now moved online, what is the FTC doing to bolster enforcement of privacy protections for the consumers? And thank you for doing this today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. So we've issued guidance on how to better protect your privacy online for education, social media, and children, including consumer education on remote learning and children's privacy, and online security tips for working from home as well. We are continuing to vigorously enforce privacy requirements under COPPA, FCRA, and other privacy laws that we enforce, and we are looking closely at new potential threats to consumer privacy, including, of course, video conferencing apps and contact tracing initiatives. You know, as I mentioned before, this is an important thing that's going on for our country, and so this is an important priority for us.
We currently have no more members in the question queue. I will turn the briefing over to Chair Schakowsky. Chair Schakowsky, are you there? I think at this point, this ends our conference call, and thank you for everyone participating.